Hey guys, so today I'm going to show you how I go about producing and writing a modern pop rock banger in the vein of Olivia Rodrigo, MGK, Maggie Lindemann, that kind of thing. Over the last few years, the mainstream has kind of been reinventing rock in a way with giving it a modern pop sound. Obviously, a lot of rock fans aren't happy about that. Personally, as a songwriter and producer, I love it. I just think it's always cool to hear rock working its way into the mainstream and kind of getting a more modern, updated sound. So the keyword for today is definitely going to be simple, simple, simple. I know I keep talking about simplicity in these videos, and it's because a lot of the best music is very simple. Because simple doesn't always mean easy to write or boring. It's about finding a way around being those things while still keeping it simple. So getting started, tempo-wise, I want to go for something pretty laid back. So we're going for a kind of 155 BPM, just sort of groove. Not too fast, not too chaotic. And we're actually going to start with a very simple bass guitar that's just going to carry the entire song. So I'm just going to go ahead and track that now. I've got these two bass sounds, very Olivia Rodrigo inspired. So we have this like fuzz one. Super aggressive, but if you listen to Olivia Rodrigo's stuff, there's always a pretty strong bass guitar with that kind of sound. And then we just have a very standard bass sound, and these are both kind of similar. The fuzz one, if you saw my Nirvana video, it's basically a tweaked version of that tone, so just a bunch of distortion, dark glass ultra, mark bass amp. And then the grunge one is just dark glass going into this Ampeg SVT and just really aggressively cutting the mids on that. Right, so I'm gonna go ahead and track a laid back kind of simple riff. Nothing crazy, just major scale, single notes, and put that on both tracks. And the reason I'm starting with bass is because the bass is going to be the center of this track, because it kind of has to be. If you think about it, listen to Olivia Rodrigo or any of the artists I mentioned, it's kind of all about the bass. With modern music, it's like, these might be mainstream artists, but they're doing rock and they want this music to stand up against all the other stuff out there in the mainstream. And modern music in general has more bass than ever, more powerful bass than we've ever heard in music, because the technology can handle that now. It used to always be the thing you can't hear that's in the background. These days, it's like, it's right up front and it's just driving the whole song because there's just not enough power in the guitars to give you that modern sound. So we're building everything around the bass here pretty much. And if you saw my last video on doing the Marilyn Manson type track, I'm going to do the same trick in this one. If you didn't see that, it'll be a little surprise later on, but the bass, although it does sound kind of big, it's not enough, so we need more for it to really sound modern and powerful and crisp, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So before that, let's get some drums laid down. As always, I'm just using Get Good Drums, and I've separated the drums out, but let's just program, again, something simple, laid back, kind of grungy. So just a kick and a snare, and then put that on all the tracks. Alright, and the reason that I'm separating these tracks out is just because they have different processing. So we look at the kick, it's just distorted with some decapitator and EQ'd like this. Whereas the snare has an envelope shaper, bringing down the attack and release a little. Some different EQ, just a little bit of OTT to make it slap harder. So now we'll throw down some guitars. And as you can see, I have a bunch of guitar sounds here, left and right, for a few different sounds. I know it looks like a lot right now, but it will make sense in a minute. We're kind of just going to orchestrate some big guitar sounds for different parts of the song. And this is part of why I'm saying simple is important, because from there, if you take a simple idea like this riff that we have, you know, from there we can build it out and make it into something huge that's still based around a simple idea that a listener can easily get behind. So in this main section, we essentially have two main sounds. We're going to use this rock sound, I've called it, which is more for the high-end crispness and clarity. And then we have what I've called fuzz, which is, as the name suggests, more for the power, distortion, aggression, and just to keep it super intense. So you can hear that one's not going to be up front, it's in the background, but it's very powerful sounding. So that's just going to add the low mid power that we need under that and kind of lock in with the bass. Sometimes you want them to sound separate. In this instance, I just want a wall of sound with everything going in the same direction, just sounding as huge as possible. So let's now track a left and right for both those guitar sounds. Right, and so I'm double tracking, so I'm just going to process these through the same tones. So essentially the two sounds are blending into one. All right, so now we have this pop drum kit I've been loving lately called Candy. Very, very bright, very powerful, very modern. So we're just going to layer that. So we'll go for some 8th note hi-hats. Turn those down. And then let's add this clap. And you'll notice I've put this just off the beat because I want this to stand out on it to kind of feel like as the snare hits, there's a big clap. So if we throw it slightly off, it won't just blend straight in with the snare. And that's all we're going to do for that track. All that we need that to do is basically introduce kind of a modern element that like, oh, there's some pop drums in here, there's some digital drums in here, but it just adds kind of some energy and just a little bit of like bubblegum pop. All right, so it's already sounding pretty big and it's like a full rock mix now. We've got a drum kit, we've got electric guitars, and we've got bass guitar. But I want to take it further because, like I was saying, this is modern production. We may be going for a rock sound where it just sounds like a really huge band, but modern production tends to take it further than that, and there's more stuff going on than you may notice at first, which isn't a bad thing. Production is an instrument in itself, so we're going to get into some more of that kind of stuff now. And this is the trick I was talking about that I used in the Marilyn Manson video. So I have this that I've called industrial bass, and this is not the kind of sound you will probably be expecting because it's very aggressive. And I used it, in the Marilyn Manson track, in the trap metal one that I did, in the Rammstein one. Very, very nasty looking waveforms. Distortion literally turned up full. Then that's running into a distortion, into a compressor, and from there into a guitar fuzz turned all the way up and decapitated. Yeah, it's a pretty nasty sound. But again, the goal with this is not that it's going to stick out. If it did, it would definitely sound out of place in this kind of thing because we want it to feel fun, mainstream, and accessible. But what I'm going to do is program the exact same thing that the bass guitar is playing. This is the kind of thing that if you just heard the song, you would be like, yep, guitars and bass, and it sounds pretty big. You wouldn't have probably noticed it if I wasn't showing you this. It sticks out a little bit right now, but when we've added everything else we're going to add, it will just sound like a huge bass guitar sound. So this is definitely a trick I recommend. Do not be afraid to layer synths or digital sounds with your guitars and bass. As long as you really make sure it feels human and feels like not distracting, but actually adds to the guitar and bass and adds to the human feel and just makes it all sound bigger. And it's a great trick to use. It's like, if people don't know it's there and they just think this fucking rocks, then it doesn't matter how you made it. It just matters how good the end product is. You got to sneak little things in there like this to get that extra power that modern production allows us to achieve. All right, and then I have another one, which is a very, very similar sound, but it's not running into the guitar fuzz. It's kind of a more straight 808 almost. Still very aggressive. What I'm going to do with this one is basically use it like an 808, and I'm just going to, like this, emphasize the first note of each bar. So creates even more power on that downbeat. Just a little more bass as it drops. Just in the background, right? And I just have a couple of kicks and cymbals that I'm going to add. So this kick, again, super aggressive, but I'm kind of taming it. So this is how it sounds raw. And then with my processing, so again, very bassy and very aggressive in the high end. You can hear that kind of pew. So it's got the bit of high end there to help it punch through all these loud guitars. Then we have the cymbal. We're just using that kind of as like a release on the drop. So it really feels like it drops. So we'll follow the bass guitar with the kick drum. And that's just going to lock in with the drums we've already got and make it sound even bigger. And hopefully this is starting to make sense what I'm saying about using a simple idea, but just kind of pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it until you've got something that's just so huge that no one's going to listen and be like, well, this is kind of boring. I'm just going to quickly add one more guitar track. So we have this one in the center this time, and it's just a different sound. This one has some delay and reverb and a bit more mid-range, again, more body. And having it in the center is just going to mean that as well as the left and right, you've got even more. I'm just pulling out every trick I have up my sleeve basically to make things sound big. All right, so last thing for this main riff, and then we'll get into the verse and chorus. It's a little too kind of grunge in my opinion at this point. I want this to feel very mainstream, and we've established a base of heavy, aggressive rock. I'm not too worried about it getting too pop here, so what I'm going to do is add this synth, which is actually like this kind of weird dancey like 80s synth in Cube, just a stock Cubase sound. Kind of a weird sound, very synth pop, but to me that's just a very kind of cool pop sound. So I have all this processing, vibrato, compression, and a bunch of distortion. And we're going to throw down like a top melody line that's just going to sit on top of everything. And then I'm also going to add, so this is my kind of basic super saw preset in Vital. Very high energy, very distorted, very powerful. So we're going to layer the two. So kind of weird on its own, but in the mix, check this out. Just kind of added a bit more fun on top and also a bit more melody, a bit more emotion. So we'll get into the verse in a second, and we have even more guitar sounds for that. So before we get into a verse, let me just quickly make an intro by moving this across, and let's take one of these guitar tracks. And I have a track here called Intro Guitar, which is basically what we had, but going into vinyl, which is kind of making it just sound old and like it's being played on a vinyl or something. And then also, a trick I like to do is put a really fast reverb so that it sounds like it's in a room, but not a big room. Because I kind of feel like this is a trick people like Olivia Rodrigo do to make it feel like these huge corporate mainstream songs sound personal and sound kind of like, just like a demo that she's just recording in her bedroom. Like it gives it a personal kind of touch. So I think it's cool to start the song like that, make it kind of feel like a demo, and then we drop it into the huge. So just start with this kind of personal, chilled out bedroom kind of thing, and then it drops. And it's like, whoa, it's like a huge version of that idea. So we have an intro there, and now I'm just going to add, it's like a reverse snare that I made with a bass drop reversed in there as well to build us up for everything dropping in. Makes it feel even more impactful when it finally drops. It gives the listener everything that original riff was teasing. I just want to jump in, guys, and say if you're enjoying this video, hit the like, subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss all the videos I have coming up. If you want to work together or buy a track, all the links you need are in the description, so check that out. Thanks so much for watching. Let's get back into it. All right, so in the verse, you guessed it, we're going to go simple. So I have, again, this very aggressive, but kind of also aggressively low passed and high passed. So it's just kind of like this mid-range, almost like a telephone effect, which again makes it personal. Kind of feels like it's coming through a phone. And it's also held back. It's like it's distorted. So it's telling the listener like the aggression's still there, but you got to wait for the chorus. And the same thing on the right. The drums, I'm going to kind of chill them out. I have a separate snare track here that's a little quieter, so it's not slapping quite as hard. So we'll start with like an open hat. All right, so then again, we're going to throw like a top line on there, but it's not going to be synth this time. It's going to be guitar, and we're going to actually go, even though this is a major song and it's, you know, very mainstream and accessible, we're going to go a little more emo. So let's track that now, again on the left and the right. In the Deftones videos I've done, I talked a little bit about how you can take major and kind of make it sound like the most emo thing, even though we think of major as, you know, happy and nice and pleasant sounding. You can take it and kind of make it sound so emotional, so powerful, so minor. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. It's like within a major context, I'm taking that and finding the kind of emo in there. It just adds, you know, that bit of kind of tension that we need. So it's not just happy and fun and pop. It's got some depth to it. All right, so bass guitar now. We are going to go for something, again, more chill in the verse. So what we're going to do is kind of just follow the riff, but kind of take some notes out. So, and you can see I've called this basic because it is literally just a basic bass sound. I'm just using the Mark bass amp. No high end, just, it's just bass. It's just low end. Let's just track that now and give some depth underneath everything so that there's still bass in the verse, but it's just not huge, monstrous bass. All right, so we'll start picking the tension up a little more in the second half of the verse. So first I will just add this 808, just emphasizing the first note of each bar. And let's also bring back the pop drums, but let's take that from over here, put it over there, and just get rid of the clap. That just steps things up a little and keeps the progression going through the verse so it doesn't get boring. All right, so now we have a verse, and now we're going to go into the chorus, and I'm going to go simple. So we're going to go double time. Let me just quickly, I'm going to throw down like a quick break, like a bar of break. And we'll have like a big snare kick on the offbeat. So that kind of picks up the tempo all of a sudden, and it's going to take us into this heavy rock chorus. And all I'm going to do is literally take the riff we had before. This is going to seem like really lazy songwriting, but I promise this is going to make sense in a minute. I also have this chorus lead track, which I'm going to use. And this is, again, just another layer. Obviously, the chorus is where you want things to sound the biggest. All right, and the thing that's going to be important here in the chorus is the drums. We're going to speed it up. We're going to give it a punk, kind of pop punk feel rather than the chilled, kind of grungy feel of the verses. And that's what's going to differentiate this. So I know it seems lazy that I'm just copying the exact same riff over, but I promise this is going to sound like a completely different section in a second. And this is actually what makes pop really hard to write, in my opinion, because people think it's easy to make, it's simple. It's like you just come up with a simple idea and then repeat it for 3 minutes. But to me, that is the genius of pop. There's such a science to it because it is easy to write an engaging song that changes every 2 seconds. To write something that starts with one idea, like this is basically built off 2 chords. This is basically going ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Everything happening in this song is following that formula. Those are 2 chords I like, 2 power chords. It could not be more simple, but there's so much you can do with that. There's so much you can build on it. And it's such a challenge to make a pop song and keep it engaging, keep it interesting, make it so the listener doesn't notice that you're basically just repeating the same thing over and over again for 3 minutes. And yeah, obviously leaving space for the vocal is a huge part of that. The vocal is going to carry the song and you're just kind of giving it a base to work from. So you don't want to overcomplicate it in that sense. So what we're going to do drum wise now is the chorus obviously is the place where it's going to rock the hardest. So we'll go double time, more kick drums. And we're just going to go for like a punk rock feel. Dun dun da dun da dun dun da. And we're also going to use a similar 808 here to in the verse. So these are both using Initial Audio 808, which is not a crazy plugin. It's just a very basic kind of, you know, that's all we need. Just kind of a subby, you know, just kind of a modern hip hop. And we're just going to do what these synths have been doing the whole time. Follow the bass guitar. It's in the background, but it just gives the bass guitar this huge feeling. All right, now listen to this. I said I'm not just recycling the same ideas and being lazy. Listen how this goes. I'm just going to copy across everything actually. So listen to how this transitions over. It clearly goes from a chorus into like a kind of instrumental section, which also, if you imagine there's some amazing vocalist on this chorus and then the chorus ends, it really feels like a new section, even though it's just the same thing repeating. All right, so as you can see, I've just copied everything over. So we are almost there now. I'm going to quickly add a bridge and then we're done. Okay, guys, so here's the full thing. I'll show you in a second. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this all made sense with all the crazy guitars and stuff going on. Hopefully it's given you guys some ideas for your own music. Like I said, hit me up if you want to work together or if you want to buy a beat or whatever. It's all in the description. I'll show you guys how it sounds and we'll listen to the full thing. I'll skip through the parts that repeat. Let's go. Modern pop rock, Olivia Rodrigo, MGK, whatever. Here's how it sounds.